Yeah, so today this is about conversations. I think a lot of the conversations we've been having with partners, and particularly with partners who have customer opportunities, it feels like there's a need to both qualify and understand scope. And our hope is to present to you a little bit of a framework of how to do that, and then give you some hints around maybe some things that bridge from a sales conversation into an operational conversation. So, Jamie, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's go. And for those of you who don't know or new around here, I'm Jamie Norris. I have an upgraded title, but we can call me the Partner Solutions Manager. But I'm the manager of onboarding and growth here at RingLogix. And I, of course, have Wayne here. If Wayne, you want to introduce yourself.
I do. I'm the VP of operations, and that may have been the last time I actually wore a sport coat in that picture.
Love it, love it. All
Uh,
right, here.
so our agenda, we're going to have a little bit of an intro here, but the crux of this is we've broken it down into two different blocks. Our first block is just to understand the why. So the why is the customer need. So we want to have a conversation with customers that elicit their need, but we also need to understand the how. And that's getting from an understanding of that need to an understanding of how we produce the outcome that they're looking for. And then Q&A. All right. Um, so what you're looking at here is a pedestal with a sculpture on the pedestal. And you're probably asking yourself, I don't see a sculpture. Where's the sculpture? Well, you can't see that sculpture. You can't touch that sculpture, but somebody paid $18,000 for that sculpture. Seems kind of weird. Now, why am I talking about this sculpture here today? Because I think when we start to consider voice AI conversations, that it feels a little bit like we're having a conversation about trying to sell that sculpture, something you can't see or feel or touch. Jamie, if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure.
So I think to help us with that, we want to approach these conversations maybe differently than we have before in the past. So typically, we would have discussions around features. Now we're moving to discussions around business outcomes. When we talked about features, it's kind of easy, particularly when we're talking about PBX. PBXs tend to be known requirements, right? If a customer's had a PBX or phone system before, they know what it's missing or what they want. So that part tends to make our job pretty easy. With voice AI agents, though, we've got this tremendous amount of curiosity going on in the marketplace. And curiosity sounds more like, what can this do for me? Tell me a bit about it. How can this help? Right. So we move from this place where we're demoing our PBX features to trying to explain to a customer how we're going to deliver value. So the way we go about this is we need to really understand fairly intimately about how they work. We're going to identify the friction that occurs today within the way that they work. And that's where we identify the pains and gains that Jamie's going to highlight. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we propose automation to reduce those frictions and to produce the business outcomes. This also transitions our conversation a bit more from a cost to a benefit. You can think about the benefit as ROI, but not every uh, voice AI project or even automation project for that matter is justified purely on ROI terms. So there's definitely business cases, but it doesn't always come down to pure numbers sort of thing. Okay. So the framework that we're working with today is the conversations on the why side of things. We're going to seek to understand the customer situation. We're going to have some dialogue around how we elicit the pains and the gains. And then we're going to have some ideas around how to assess the impacts and quantifiable outcomes. I liken this sort of to like a spin selling model. If anybody ever went through this, what's the situation, what's the pain, what's the impact of that pain, and then what's the needs associated with that. Then we're going to move to identifying a 5-part framework that I think is just super useful for gathering initial information, helping us develop a high level scope, and then helping us really answer the question, is this a doable thing? Because I think sometimes there may be a misunderstanding in the marketplace by the end customer that an agent can know and do everything. And so we have to be fairly prescriptive in terms of how we approach these situations.
So I'm going to take the why. So the why. So before we talk about AI features, right? Flowbot AI features specifically, features, pricing, or demos with customer, we kind of need to answer one question. Is there a strong enough business outcome to justify AI, right? If there's isn't a measurable impact, it's not really an opportunity, right? It kind of goes into it's a science experiment. So, your provider role is not to sell AI. It's to, identify operational gaps where automation is going to create measurable movement, right? So, if we can't quantify gains or the cost of inefficiency, it's not something you really want to like move forward with. Everything we're going to go over starts with an outcome. All right. So this next slide is the purpose of discovery, right? Discovery has to have a very specific purpose. So what we're trying to do here is just begin discovery with outcomes, desired outcomes of your customer. We want to qualify, or we want you to qualify the opportunity, or we'll all do that together. But you're going to be positioning yourself as an authority, right? You're going to be looking to find the pain or the gain, right? Whichever it may be, by building a business case and quantifying that impact. And we're hoping to provide you with a formalized structure for conversation, right? This should be structured. There's very specific things you should be asking to do this. So the outcome is the actual product, right? People, humans, we don't wake up saying, and customers, I need AI in my life, right? I need an AI agent. That's usually not the general thing that we all think of. Customers wake up saying, man, we're missing all these calls. My team, they're overloaded. Appointments aren't getting scheduled. I don't know what's going on. These support tickets, I'm getting complaints, they're taking too long. And at the end of the day, like my customers are just frustrated, right? So we're not, nobody's just waking up and being like, oh, I need AI in my life. So that's kind of, that'll help steer you in the right direction. But, Flowbot AI is not the actual product, right? Faster response time is the product that you're selling. Captured revenue is the product that you're selling. Reduce staff strain, that's the product. Reduce expenses is the product. All right. So that's what we're looking to sell, not Flowbot AI. So we kind of Wayne and I brainstormed a little bit. We were looking for signs of a strong voice AI opportunity, right? So one question we thought about was, does this customer receive repetitive calls, right? Do the humans that answer the phones today, are they answering those same questions over and over and over again, right? Like, what time are you open? Or, what's your address? Or do you do this? Are you missing a lot of after hours calls? Are staff interruptions hurting productivity? If I'm in the middle of a project and like I have to pick up the phone to answer a question about hours or something, how is that hurting that productivity? Is your actual revenue tied to how fast calls are answered? Do customers complain about wait times? Are they frustrated on getting answers to just super simple questions? They got to wait for a call back to get that answered. And is there just a faster path for the customer to get resolution? So, we're kind of here, we're looking for signals that this customer has a strong opportunity for voice AI, because it's not going to be for everybody, right? And then we talk about the situations, like Wayne said, kind of the spin model. Your goal with the situation is, understanding and being able to document what happens with your customer today. So some discovery questions that we came up with, and I'm sure we could all come if we, had a brainstorming session, we could come up with many more than this. We just picked some of the top ones. But you'll want to ask your customer, how are your inbound calls handled today? Right. So just trying to kind of get the baseline of what their workflow looks like today. And then, what happens if nobody answers? Right. What happens to that call or that customer? Do they call somewhere else? Do they take their business elsewhere? Do they keep calling back? Like what happens? How many calls per day, per hour are you receiving? And what are the top five call types that you're getting? Is there a percentage between repetitive calls and complex? And what is that, right? Is it, 60% of your calls are repetitive? It's the same question getting asked over and over, and but 40 are complex where maybe they need a real human to interact. We see a lot of this so far, and we're kind of calling it the red flag, right? We just want AI to handle everything, right? That's kind of an overwhelming thing for you as a partner to try to configure because, even a human can't handle everything, right? So, if you're hearing that from your customer, I feel like you're going to definitely want to dig in with them a little bit more because, we're all hopefully a little more realistic that, it's not going to handle everything.
So I'm just
Um,
going to add
yeah.
a little bit of color to this. I'll give an example because sometimes it may be difficult for somebody when you're talking to them on the spot to know all of the details around their call center or the calls that are coming in, but they may have a feel. So a good example of this was as I'm with a healthcare company with one of our partners, and the subject came up. We transfer a lot of calls from our call center to just another department. We don't really want to do that. In their estimation, 20% of their calls were actually transfers to another department, right? So that's a great use case of how do we eliminate 20% of the calls that currently are being handled by a team right now that really don't need to handle them and don't add any value on that call. And then there was a second piece to this is a lot of the calls that they were getting were just checking to see what time their appointment was. Again, really low value conversation, but that was somewhere in the 20 to 25-ish% range. So they have maybe a feel, but maybe not data. So that sometimes you're just going to be working with the feel to help you get a picture for where you might add the most value.
Well, yeah, and this is probably out of all the steps you can do in what we're showing you today, this is probably the most important step because it's moving you from symptoms to numbers, right? So it's actually you're getting and when you get a number and somebody can see like how many calls they're missing, right? Or things that are going awry, that increases urgency to me, right? When you start to see like, oh my gosh, I have that many abandoned, like then it becomes more urgent, right? And we're not solving inconveniences, right? We're solving measurable inefficiencies at the end of the day. So I think this is probably in this puzzle one of the most important steps, if not the most important step. So and then we'll move on to pain, right? Quantifying the value of inefficiency at the end of the day. These are the specific questions that are going to lead to numbers that lead to urgency. So, what percent of calls go unanswered? Is there revenue per booked appointment? And what is that, right? So, if you're not booking appointments, what's attached to that? Employees, right? You pay your employees. So, if they're handling basic calls and they're a skilled employee, that's an inefficiency. And then, how many abandoned calls per week? How many customers are you losing because an employee is handling routine calls instead of sales calls are some examples. So, just finding out the pain points that your customer has is really important. But before we introduce automation ever, we have to understand what's happening today with your customer. So And we did build you a little checklist that you can kind of, it's super simple because it's only 4 parts. Kind of go over in your head, when you're talking to a customer, just to pinpoint if this is a strong voice AI opportunity, right? If there's repetitive call volume, sure sign it's a strong opportunity. Measurable impact. Is there a defined process that your customer uses? And is there urgency with leadership who makes the decisions, right? So, if 3 out of 4 of these aren't true, you might want to kind of start at step one again, right, with the customer and see if you can dig up some more information. And Wayne, I'm going to kick it back to you.
Okay. Um, so I think it's helpful to think in context of low-hanging fruit. Answering service replacement is a just easy place to start for a lot of people who are doctors, lawyers, accountants, right? A lot of them are paying for this sort of thing. So when you walk into a case like this, it's probably one of the easiest things you can do because you're talking about a direct replacement of a cost. Not everything we do with voice AI agents will be replacing people or things that have a direct cost, but this is one of those things that I go, okay, I can see a measurable cost here, plus I can improve the customer experience. So if we look at it in the market, you expect to spend, and there's lots of different answering services and different pricing models for different answering services, but some do it on a per minute basis, and you'll see them at 75 cents to $1.50 a minute. Some are going to be, monthly fee plus, a certain amount for every call. But really, if you look at it, what do? They largely just taking notes on who the caller is and sending that back to the company. A voice AI agent can do that for less. If we look at retail, and I'm going to use Ring Central as the example. If Ring Central is a 59 cents a minute, you'll see people a little under that. You'll see people a little over that. There's obviously a cost justification, but we have the same capabilities with an answering service. Plus, I can do other things, right? I can answer frequently asked questions. They can be task handling. I can log a ticket, things of that nature that can add far more value to that interaction and maybe actually leave the business in a place where they don't need to follow up in the morning after that caller called because the task could have been fulfilled by a voice AI agent. So we see, call it a reasonably good business case for a lot of these types of things, but one of many, many examples we can be talking about. Okay, I'm going to get a little bit more into the how, and this is at this point, Jamie, do you want to go to the next slide? At this point, we've developed a decent understanding of the reasons why that company may have an interest in employing an agent. Our how purposes here is going to be a little bit more of a continuation of the qualification process. So can we implement this in the way the customer is imagining it? Sometimes the answer is going to be no, right? Because people do have some pretty wild concepts. But I'd say generally speaking, if a person can do a job, there's quite likely a path for an agent to also do a similar job, maybe faster, better, cheaper. But the reality of this is that people have some expectations around what they think an AI agent can do. We're going to start to peel into some of the details so that once we finish with this section, you'll be able to kind of go through and go, okay, I can understand how to develop a high level scope of work, and a proposal can be developed from that scope of work. It'll also help you if you're saying, okay, I know what they need, but I can't do everything. So I may need some assistance. This will put you in a place where you can clearly define what kind of assistance you need. So you want to go on to the next one? And by the way, if you need our assistance, we're always here to help, right? Like if you have a customer opportunity that is fully qualified, our goal here is to get it over the finish line for you. So let us know if that gets into a place where you need some assistance. fundamental questions. So this can be considered both a why question and a how question when we get into this. So 3 questions I think you're going to fall back on all of the time are going to be, they're going to sound like this, and you'll have your own versions of it. How do you do that today? And why do we ask that question? Because we want to know exactly how you do it today, because we're going to need to do some of the same things. Walk me through that. So it's a process, right? Like I want to understand from step 0 to completion what that process looks like. Who currently does that and how? Are there multiple people who do get involved in those steps, right? So now I've got a picture for just what's happening within the business today, and I start to get a picture for these particular things. And this is, again, a checklist. So I want to know with some level of accuracy, what is the role that this agent is going to have? What is the goal of the agent? What they can or cannot do? What they know or need to know? What they just need to decide, and what they need to do. I'm going to cover each of these individually, and some of these you're going to see they kind of can fit together in some ways. So it's kind of building blocks here. So roles and goals. Never create an agent if you do not know with any level of accuracy the roles and the goals. And this is strictly from like if I'm going to build a prompt and I can't accurately define for the agent what the roles and the goals are, I got a kind of messy thing going on with my agent. So this is going to help us, but it's also going to help clarify the full intent of what it is we're trying to deliver. So think of it kind of like a job description, right? It's high level, like we're not going to get into the how do you do this and how do you do that stuff yet. But this is going to define the role. For example, you are a driver and you will transport a package, right? That's a role, right? We clearly know that that's a driver who transports packages. There's a lot more things that we can layer into there to help continue to describe what that role is, but that gets us a basic understanding. The goal adds more specificity and a definition around what success looks like. You're going to transport a package to LA by Friday while using no more than 3 tanks of gas, right? So now I got some clear definition to help guide our agent, and then we're going to suggest don't create too many roles. Don't create too many goals. This is the point of this section when you're talking to a customer, is to have an understanding of what the scope will be without letting the scope creep so wide that we have to worry about the quality of the output that the agent will produce, because we may need to do 2 agents. We may need to do 3 agents. Kind of depends. A lot of this that we need to do. There's an enormous amount of flexibility, but with flexibility also comes some chances that the agent can wander off in purpose. So an example of this, in my driving, you're a driver. Well, can I pick up a package in Anchorage, or a passenger in Anchorage? It's not in my goal, right? But if I try and cram that into my goal, my agent may start to think, oh, I can be a driver, transports a package. I can also be a driver who transports a package to LA, but I can also be a driver who picks up people in Anchorage. So I do all of these things. Now the confusion becomes, I'm headed to LA, but I just found out that, hey, maybe I got to go to Anchorage. So now I deviate my route and I find myself up in Anchorage when the priority really was, the objective here was to get to LA with that package and 3 tanks of gas. So just some things to sort of think about, because this high level to me is one of the most important things to understand when you move to building a scope for the agent. And it's also one of the things that maybe can be a big source of confusion here later on down the road when you develop a plan for the customer. Cans and can'ts. The question around what an agent can do pretty straightforward. I think everybody's going to tell you what they want the agent to do. Where things get forgotten is what we don't want the agent to do. So there'll be things like, I've got a medical billing agent. I don't want that medical billing agent to diagnose somebody, right? That's not their capabilities. They have zero understanding on how to do that. But because LLMs provide a lot of information, if we don't put the guardrail up, somebody can ask a question and get an answer to things that we don't want. So the key point here is we're just trying to understand how to limit the scope a little bit, so we have a clear point of action here as we move forward. So, Jamie, if you want to go to the next one. Okay. Knowledge to me is one of the more interesting things. I think you guys all have seen like how easy it is to add knowledge to a rack, right? I can grab a web link, I can grab a document. Any of those things are fair game for a agent to consume for the purposes of doing their job. Right. So FAQs, standard operating procedures. In the case of like a receptionist, we're going to know, okay, we got extensions. Where are they going to transfer? Right. So these are the things that I think will add a lot of value to your understanding of the scope of the agent. Right. Like, where does this information exist? So the question of who does this and how do they do it? That should come up in that question. If not, you're going to want to peel into that deeper and just get a better understanding. Okay, what kind of questions, right? Where do those questions and their corresponding answers reside? Do we need to produce that? Because if you have to interview the customer to produce some of that stuff, you're going to want to bake that into your scope of work. The other thing that makes agents kind of fun is agents get information from a caller, right? Also collect information that may exist in other places. So I'm going to call it, this is information they might collect from the business. So think of like a CRM or a ticketing system, right? So when we're talking about getting information from the caller, let's just say we're going to set up an appointment. Well, I probably need to verify, does this person, well, let's say we're a medical company, does this person have they are they a current patient, right? Are they a new patient, right? So we're going to want to know how do we verify that? And so there'll be things that may come out in that process, and if you're not hearing them, you're going to want to start to ask the questions to get a better picture for what kind of informational needs. On the collecting information from the business, think of these as applications, right? So we've got workflows into these applications, and the wonderful thing about having the Zapiers and the makes and the N8Ns is we have all these applications that are suddenly opened up to us for workflow opportunities, right? So we're no longer constrained about having to write APIs or custom webhooks and things. We can do that, don't get me wrong, but a lot of what we're probably likely to do is relatively simple and relatively repeatable for a lot of our customers, particularly if we operate in specific verticals. We may have some templates that we just build them once and then kind of rinse, lather, repeat over time. So collecting information is going to be key to just understanding the full scope of what we're going to need to deliver. So the agent can make decisions. By the way, this slide and the next slide, make a decision and do a thing are often paired together. So I'm kind of breaking them out just to give enough of a picture. But the reality is likely when you're talking to the customer, you're going to get all this stuff put together as one thing, and you may or may not need to break it apart. But for purposes of our discussion, I just want you to have some idea that if somebody is giving you a decision they expect the agent to make, that there's likely some action that needs to occur afterwards. So does it decide where to route a call, or how does it decide where to route a call? I guess. If it's after hours, I may do something different than what I do during the day. So watch out for lots of if-thens. So if we've got a lot of conditional things going on that the agent has to make decisions on, my first guess would be one, it got more complicated than it really probably needed to be. It may secondarily, it may be better off that some things that have a condition are actually better answered by a person, because if there's too many if thens, there may be too much need for logic that a person needs to be employed to do that. But you can have if thens, and we can nest those if thens and produce some pretty complicated things. The question is it worth the effort and time to do it, or is there a cleaner way to actually do that? And are some things maybe better kept to a person than to an agent? So examples of this sort of stuff. What do we do if a caller isn't a patient? How do we handle a request that isn't known? So I've got a request for pricing on a product that the agent doesn't know about. There's got to be a decision process. What determines whether it books an appointment or transfers to another department, right? Or a human. So there's all sorts of decisions that could be made through this process, and this is where you kind of need to examine this process with your customer and get a sense for how the human is making those decisions and what they do. Hopefully, there's a documented process, and you can refer to the documentation. If not a big deal. But that does require a little bit of a deeper dive with the actual customer to understand how we're going to set some things up. Thank you, Jamie. So what does our agent do? This is where I start to think more about tools I'm going to employ, right? How do they transfer the call? In our example, we've got cold transfer tools, we got warm transfer tools. I got a choice between those. How do they create a ticket? Right? This is a tool that we're going to need to create to have a verification process of that person, and then potentially have a ticket creation tool as well, if they're not contained within the same tool. How do you schedule an appointment, right? All of these things give us some extra detail to kind of conceive of what actions or how the agent will take an action, and if we need to give them some sort of tool to be able to complete that action. Okay. How can we help? So I was on a call earlier today with one of our partners, and they had a call coming up next week with their customer. And the idea of setting up a demo on their own domain was part of the conversation, which I think for everybody is just a wonderful idea, because going back to our first slide, if you're talking to a customer, you don't have a feature so much that you can show them. You don't have a page that you're going to go and click on a feature, in the sense that what you would show is more important to you and I as we build agents than it is to the customer, because they're, again, concerned about outcome. So if we can help you either have a customer dialogue, scope an opportunity, we've created plenty of documents for partners to gather some information about a particular opportunity they're working on, so that they've got some guidance as to how to handle a conversation that's kind of written in front of them, and so it's a guide for them. If you need guidance on tools, rags, prompts, we're here to help. We are in the process of setting up third parties to help with some of this where you don't want to do it. For right now, we got a team that can help you, but as we continue to scale and grow up this business, we're just anticipating that we're just going to have more and more demand for it. But right now, I've got people on staff that can help us if you're in a situation where you've got a customer and you need help. I don't want anyone to feel like they don't have a place to go to get that level of assistance, and that they and their customers are left in a lurch.
The end.
All right. Okay, so Jamie, we have a couple of questions here. The first one is, do you plan to offer any additional training on prompting? The answer to that question is yes. Haven't got it scheduled. We are likely going to have several different classes later on about how to effectively prompt. Um, Prompting can feel a little scary, I think, at the beginning. I'll be honest with you, I've seen some prompts that I I don't want to call them bad because they work, which is good, right? Like, so the only thing that really matters when you write a prompt is, does it work the way you want it to work, right? But I've seen some stuff that I go, oh, holy cow, I wouldn't have thought that that would have worked. It's relatively shorter and it had less detail than I would have expected. I'm just going to encourage you, go make some mistakes. Plain English works pretty darn good for a lot of this stuff. It's when you start to get into these if-then nestings and weird combinations of branching logic that things get kind of complicated. But a lot of this stuff is very straightforward. The calling the tools of the very straightforward. Calling a RAG into use is really straightforward. So don't feel um, like there's a perfect prompt or a perfect tutorial on prompts. I think a lot of this is like writing and rewriting. My just suggestion, use active verbs. It's easier for an agent to understand active verbs, and then look for unnecessary wording and remove some of that stuff. And I'll be honest with you, I'd probably take it over to ChatGPT and say, this is what my customer told me. Give me a prompt, right? And just see what it gives you relative to the thing that you got. And I think you're going to see that ChatGPT might clean up some of your stuff, but the context and everything of what you captured would be there.
I think that was the best thing you ever taught me, Wayne, too, with prompting. So everyone knows me. I'm not a prompt engineer by any means. And I was so worried about the structure. And you were like, no, just type it in like you don't need like the pound, pound, pound. I mean, it helps make things identifiable, but you can just write, your role. It doesn't have to have pound signs or hashtags or, you don't have to do it in this prompting format. It's intuitive enough to read. I mean, it's nice to separate it just so, but it's almost like writing like little paragraphs. So don't be as concerned with the structure as like the juice, right? The guts of it. With what you're telling it. The structure helps identify and helps people read it, but it's not totally necessary. And I think when I remove that from my process of building prompts, it just made it easier for me personally. So
Good, good comment. So the next question here is around charging professional services fees. Okay, so there's two questions that actually kind of sound sort of similar. So I'm going to address this in one answer. I would absolutely consider that you should charge a professional services fee. You're going to spend some time doing analysis, working with a customer, giving them a prompt, and they're likely to tell you, that's great, can you add this? So I would expect for the first couple months, expect your agent to change a little bit, because the customers are going to start to learn a little bit more about how they work, and they're going to either want to extend the capabilities or make some changes to some of the stuff that they already told you. So I would say you want a managed services fee on an ongoing basis, because that's likely to happen over time too, as business processes and things change. You're going to want to have some way to recoup change requests. So I would suggest that that's part of the deal. And then, if you've got to set up workflow, yeah, absolutely. Like there's consulting companies out there who do that sort of thing as their core business, and they're going to charge. So I don't think you need to be shy about accommodating your customers with that kind of work, but also charging for it.
We did have a question about activation of the Flowbot AI. So existing partners, there's a couple places. If you received the follow-up email from our original Flowbot launch webinar on February 5th, instructions are in there. If you can't find that email, it is in your portal. So if you click webinar and Flowbots up in the right-hand corner when you log into the RingOS portal, it's going to give you instructions on how to get that activated on your domain. Now, Wayne, you might be able to help. There was some questions too from non-RingLogix partners on how they get to try it out.
Yeah. So Hussein was just on here. So I'm going to allow Hussein to talk for a minute because this is a question for him and his team. We allow, obviously partners to go ahead and just openly test, right? We're in this period where anybody can test this for free. There's no charge on usage or any of the components. New partners can also, be part of that. However, if you're not an existing partner, you'd have to talk to Hussein, understand a little bit more about what it does take to become a partner. And then we would make the partition available to you or a domain available to you to test through that process. So Hussein, if you want to just kind of give a quick intro on tell people where they would contact you.
Yeah, hi guys. Sorry, let me.
We put him on the spot.
Yeah, I was taking a nap while Wayne. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, if you guys can, if you can just reach out to sales@ringlogix.com or directly to me at Hussein@ringlogix.com. That's HUSSAIN at ringlogix.com. I'll just need 3 little pieces of information from you, and then we can get you going and have you use it, even though you're not a RingLogix partner.
Excellent. That looks like we have answered all the questions.
And if you were too scared to answer in the chat, you know where you can find us. I'm Jamie at ringlogix.com. So send your questions my way if you have them too. I can definitely help you out.
Excellent. And we'll be sending out a recording and the PowerPoint presentation so you guys have it. And like I said, if there's anything that we can do to help you as you're getting started here, we obviously want to make whatever training or whatever resources we have available to you.
And Orion, I see your question. Send that to me in an email, but I'll need you to get a little more specific on what you're asking because that's a pretty vast question. So maybe can you give me some, guidelines on what you're looking for with that question, and we'll try to get that answered for you. But you can just email me directly or you can create a ticket with success too, and I'll grab it. But I'd like to know more about what you're asking. Even if you want to give me a holler, give me a call, we can chat about it too. So.
Excellent.
All right. Cool.
Everybody, appreciate your attendance and have a good one.
Thanks. Have a good day, guys and gals. Bye.